Hi everyone. I've got some photos just pre and post my injury up there. Think about your life as it is right now, the job that you do, the relationships that you have, your friends, your family, a partner, perhaps many partners. Think about your daily routine. You wake up and what the rest of your day entails. What are your future goals? What are you doing to achieve those goals? Now throw it all out the window. Imagine waking up one morning and everything that you know, your life as it is, everything is lost. Your job, your relationships, your goals, they're all gone. Good perky start? I had spent 2 months travelling around Europe and had just started a new job requiring me to move to Sydney. These exciting new things that I was doing in my life were riddled with pain, and I couldn't understand why. Flying had often caused me pain, and I just thought it was normal. The air pressure must just do this to everyone, right? I'd never taken many painkillers before, and I was taking a lot of them. I was constantly suffering from fatigue. I finally went to a GP who sent me for a scan. I had a 3-centimetre colloid cyst in the third ventricle. I had 1 week to get my family down to Sydney before the neurosurgeons were due to operate. The cyst had started leaking into other cavities of my brain. I had hydrocephalus, which is a build-up of fluid in the brain, putting pressure on it and can cause brain damage. I really put the surgeons to work, and they worked tirelessly on me into the night. The operation was a success. The neurosurgical team were able to extract the fluid from the cyst. They closed me up, and while I was in recovery, I started to bleed out. I had a stroke. We don't know why. It may have been because I had smoked cigarettes. It could have been because I was overweight. Perhaps it was the amount of time that the cyst had been there. I still don't know, and probably never will. I was in a coma, not responding, and my family was told to prepare for the worst. My mother held on with hope because as she sat by my bed, every now and then she would notice that my legs would move. My natural mechanism that flushes my brain fluid had stopped working, so it was building up in my brain. It was decided that I may need a shunt inserted. A shunt is a tiny tube that drains excess cerebrospinal fluid that has built up in the skull to drain into another part of the body. In my case, it was set up to drain into my stomach. Some other people who can't have it drained into their stomach because of a variety of reasons, such as scar tissue from previous operations, need to have it drained into their heart or lungs. So I'm a lucky one. Imagine having to recover from both brain and lung or heart surgery at the same time. The insertion of the shunt worked. I woke up, but was still thinking that I was in hospital because I got my wisdom teeth taken out. Imagine the fright that gave the medical team. A second shunt was inserted, but the side effects were very clear. I had to learn how to walk again, read again, do simple everyday things like shower myself again. Those could and were all done within my 2 months at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. But the biggest issue for me was the short-term memory loss that I had acquired. The term memory of a goldfish was very fitting. I would ask a question, have it answered, and then ask the exact same question again. I remembered nothing of the conversations that I'd had, or even that I had a conversation at all. My family were told that I'd be unable to look after myself and live independently as I had. They packed up my belongings, and when I was checked out of hospital, I was moved back to Brisbane with my mother and sister. That was the first flight that I'd been on that didn't hurt. Because the Princess Alexandra Hospital is the only hospital in Queensland with a brain rehabilitation unit, putting a lot of pressure on them to treat a ridiculously huge amount of patients, I waited months before having my first appointment for assessment. They decided that I required speech therapy. I could no longer read. Physiotherapy. I couldn't walk without someone holding on to me. Occupational therapy, and to see a social worker. That's a lot of help, and it's amazing that these can be offered to me. But remember when I asked you at the start to imagine your life as if it were lived by my circumstances? How would you cope needing all of these treatments and having to wait for months to get the help that you need to get your life back on track? I was incredibly fortunate. I have a supportive family who were dedicated to helping me. My mother was able to take time off work to drive me into the PA hospital once a week, where she would wait for hours while I met with the health professionals to start working on my rehabilitation. But there are countless people who aren't as fortunate as me. So imagine needing these services and having to catch multiple modes of public transport, taking up hours of your day on top of your rehabilitation to access these services. Then add in fatigue and short-term memory loss, so you leave the rehabilitation unit not remembering what you just did anyway. The rehab at the PA had taken me as far as they could. I was ready to get back out there. I could walk very hastily and with someone holding on to me. I could read very slowly and with a lot of effort and concentration on using various techniques, and so I was ready to join the workforce again. They put me on the list for work for disabled people, and I was told that the government agency would help me address my disability during interviews and help me to find an employer that understood. If I was lucky, they might even be able to find me a job sorting through clothing bins at an op shop. I was so disheartened. All of this hard work, and I won't be able to get back to my old job in Sydney, or at least get back into the same field. I'd been pinning all of my hopes on that. I crashed, and I crashed hard. I'm sure my situation was explained to me time and time again, upsetting me over and over. But when it finally became something that I could remember, my situation was finally realised, and my psychological health took a deep dive. I thought I knew what depression meant before this. I was wrong. I am probably the most social person that I know. I stopped answering phone calls and messages, stopped going out. I didn't want to see anyone. I was so embarrassed of myself. The person who I'd become was not the person that I was. I used to be independent, social, and even though I had always been a little hard on myself, I could set my mind to something and achieve it. All of that had changed, and I wanted it back. To say I was feeling blue is an exaggerated understatement, but I couldn't find it within myself to reach out and tell someone what I was going through either. My life had changed through no fault of my own. It wasn't for the better, and the light at the end of the tunnel that I could see had now turned pitch black. My days were filled with sleeping, eating, assuring my mum, dad and sister that I was fine, and at night, when everyone had gone to bed, I would carefully plan my suicide. I needed to somehow not feel this way anymore, and ending my life seemed like the only possible answer. My life being over was, in fact, my light at the end of the tunnel. My days of depression turned into weeks, which turned into months, all the while spiralling further and further down. My father basically had to push me through the door of the doctor's office, but I had my first appointment. That was when my life started to turn around. The doctor booked me in to see a psychologist, a dietitian, and I was seeing my GP to check in once a month. But how was I going to afford to do this when I was getting $150 per fortnight from Centrelink? Yes, that's what sickness benefits gave me, $75 per week. That's far less than unemployment, and I still had medical bills to pay. You see, they give you barely enough to pay for your groceries. I'm assuming in the hope that you'll realise how impossible it is to live off and just go get a job anywhere, doing anything, without taking the time and resources that are necessary to be able to even remotely get your life back on track. And doing what it takes to get to a life that you can live is so important, no matter how long that may take. The receptionist at the doctor's surgery told me about a government program that, if eligible, gives you free sessions with a handful of medical professionals. Having her tell me that changed my life. I was finally able to get a scrimmage of the help that I needed, and that's when my pitch black tunnel started to become lit again. What me and people like me are going through is scary. There is so much uncertainty around it all. Is this it now? Is this what we should expect the rest of our lives to be like? Is there any hope? And if there is, how do we find it? Is there any point in working so hard to try to get back to where I was when I may need another surgery that could put me right back to the beginning again? I fight so hard to get back to a place where I was. I scratch and I claw my way back to a place where I can function. That's it. My goal was no longer to be a high flyer, working my way up in the business world, travelling to beautiful holiday destinations, tasting exotic foods, meeting new people. My goal was to be able to function again. How do I make plans for the future? Having someone tell you that it's all going to be all right is not comforting. How? How is it going to be all right? What is it that I have to do to make everything all right and normal again? The answer is that it will never be normal again. The normal that I knew was long gone, never to return. So my new question to myself was, how do I make my new normal the best normal that it can be? How do I find a new purpose? My family were told that it may take a few months to get myself back on track, and then I could get back to work in Sydney. Looking back, I wonder if the doctors really believed this, or if they were trying to give us some hope instead. I know there are many different personality types out there, but I am the kind that prefers actual, real information, however hard it is to hear. How can I work with falsities? I need to be able to make plans based on evidence and facts. I know that some people may react to negative news in an alarming, snap judgment kind of way. And for that reason, people, especially those in the medical industry, need to be careful how news is worded. But it's also important to tell us the truth, however hard it is to hear and cope with it. I wasn't told that the shunts were not going to last my lifetime. Of course they wouldn't. They're a man-made technology. Seems rather obvious, right? But it was never a thought for me. I have never been in the medical field and truly knew no better. So when my fatigue increased rather dramatically, followed by pain, I was wondering what was going on. I had some off weeks, so left it far longer than I should have before fronting up to the emergency at the PA hospital. I drove myself there. It still wasn't a thought for me that my shunts might be failing. I was put in a bed and kept overnight for observation. That's the last thing that I remember. One shunt was taken out and replaced by a new, more technically advanced shunt, a programmable VP shunt. I was recovering and my family were told that I could go home within the next few days. I was in and out of consciousness, very drowsy, not speaking, and was staring straight ahead without acknowledging any of my surroundings. I am very lucky that a neurosurgeon came in with their team to check on me. They asked Mum how long I had been like this, and before she had even finished telling them the answer, they had organised me for emergency surgery. My other shunt was failing. I wonder what would have happened to me if my neurosurgeon hadn't have come in. Would I be here telling you my story right now? I think there's two lessons to be learnt from this experience. Firstly, shared information. If myself and my family knew what the signs of a failing shunt were, we would be able to distinguish my symptoms and alert a professional much faster than what we did. The second lesson is for those who are not a professional. I went to a GP first and he told me to not just jump to something being wrong with my brain. I may have picked up a virus. I called the hospital and a receptionist told me if I'm feeling tired, why don't I just take it a little easier and get some sleep? I thought I was being a hypochondriac. No. You know your body better than anyone else. If you want to get answers, sometimes you have to fight for them. They don't just fall in your lap. It's not a medical professional's job to know whether you're an under-exaggerator or not. It's your job to tell them what your symptoms and concerns are so they can take the relevant steps. Sometimes you have to fight for it. I had the feeling of constant fatigue again. My head pains even when I touched it. It was getting so bad that it even became painful to rest my head on a pillow. Being the frustrating patient that I am, I once again left it too long before fronting up to the emergency department at the PA. This time, I didn't drive myself. They were amazing. When a doctor went to feel my head, I flinched before she'd even touched me. When she finally did make contact, tears were running down my face. She sent me for a scan. The setting of my shunt had changed and had drained a significant portion of my brain fluid from my head. A neurosurgeon changed my setting back. I don't think I've ever screamed so loud in my 32 years of life. Since there was very little fluid left to protect my brain, I was kept in hospital for a few days for observation. I kept getting asked if I'd hit my head recently. I have short-term memory loss. I doubt I'd remember if I did anyway. But I also couldn't understand why I was asked that question over and over again. Someone finally explained to me that because there was nothing protecting my brain from hitting up against my skull, it could cause me brain damage. Oh, communication. No, it didn't change that I couldn't remember if I'd hit my head or not, but at least I now understood how serious my situation actually was. My next outpatient's appointment was the best appointment that I've ever had. I came with a list of questions, hoping to get a smidgen of them answered. The neurosurgeon that met with myself took the time to answer each one of the questions and give us answers. Perhaps not the answers that we were hoping for, but the truth nonetheless. It was only this appointment that I learnt that my shunt setting could be changed by a strong magnetic device, going through airport security, a large refrigeration room, a microwave, and very handily, a CT scan, which I need all the time. It was at this appointment that we learned that the fluid had been taken out of my cyst, but the pocket that it had grown in was still in my brain, so there is a possibility that it will regrow. I started to lose hope. I remembered back to 2011, when my family were told that I may be able to return to Sydney and back to work in a few months. We rather ignorantly thought the problem had been rectified. It was at this appointment that I learned that I would have ongoing medical issues, but at least I had real answers and knew what to look for. After the surgery to replace my failing shunts, I groggily told my mother that I couldn't do it anymore. No more surgeries. I can't go through it again. I don't remember telling her that, so it came as a bit of a surprise when I sat her down with a cup of tea in January 2017 to tell her, and she wasn't surprised. Upset? Yes, incredibly, but not surprised. I slowly took my time in telling my loved ones that I couldn't do it anymore. I had mixed reactions. There was sadness, shock, anger, a sense that I was being weak. I was expecting and prepared for all types of reactions. I understand how much my decision affects the people that I love and care about. But I also have to be honest with you. The perception that I'm being weak and giving up absolutely infuriates me. I've never been the type of person to get angry. I'm more the peace, love and understanding type. But when people insinuate that I'm being weak, I feel this bubbling rage of anger on my chest. I want to be able to swap with them, so they can live a life with my experience. One day, 1 week, it wouldn't be enough time, because they'd know that it's going to go back to normal soon. They'd know life is going to get better. This has been the hardest fight that I've ever been through, by far, and I wouldn't say that prior to the tumour, I've had an easy life. I've had to jump many hurdles that others would not have bothered jumping, but this is no longer a race that I can compete in. At that amazing outpatient's appointment that I mentioned before, I asked how long this shunt was expected to last. I got an answer something similar to this. It can vary from person to person. There was one woman who had her shunt for 17 years. When we went to replace it, it turns out that it wasn't working anyway, and she didn't need her shunt. I asked this question over and over again at every appointment that I had. I wanted an answer. I have been seeing a neuropsychologist and had been discussing my frustrations with not getting a steadfast answer. She told me how to word my question. It worked. 3 to 5 years. But should I have to word my question in a certain way in order to get an answer? What if I'd never seen this psychologist? Would I still not know? I feel I have a right to knowledge, especially when it comes to my own body. What I do with those answers is up to me. You are not responsible for that. I am. The surgery is not the hardest part of my brain tumour journey. Yes, it sucks. Yes, it hurts like hell. Yes, being in a hospital is lonely, and the food is terrible. The hardest part is when I'm released. Physically, the neurosurgeons have done their job, and they've done it well. I'm alive, and I can't thank them enough for what they have done for me. They extended my life for many years, and in those years, I have had many beautiful, joyous experiences that I appreciate beyond explanation. But the hardest part is being thrown back into the real world without being able to live in the real world. Having the surgery puts me right back to the beginning again. I fight and I claw my way back to where I was before, and then I need another. I have had countless physiotherapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, neuropsychology, medical appointments, MRIs and CT scans. So much so that one doctor commented that he's surprised I'm not glowing from the significant amount of radiation my body has had. And I am thankful that I live in a country that can provide all of these appointments to me. I know what you're thinking, that I'm depressed, and that's why I have made my decision. I understand that death is permanent. I also now know what depression is. I've been there. It's a sad, lonely journey without any hope. So I can tell you unequivocally that I'm not depressed. I'm not even sad. I don't want to end my life. I just know that I cannot go through another surgery. You need a certain amount of strength to pull yourself through, and I no longer have that strength. Think back to the start of me talking. Did you picture your life falling apart? Imagine someone put you in the pilot seat of a plane. You had never flown a plane before, and then you were told to fly it. That's what this journey has felt like. Think about how quickly life can change. 1 minute you're living your life, the next minute everything is falling apart. So what now? I have re-evaluated my goals. I am so very wary of not allowing my decision to stop me from living my life to the fullest. It would be easy to say, well, that's it, and lock myself in a dark room with a bottle of red. Maybe more than one bottle. But what is it that will give my life fulfilment? I would so love if someone who is going through or is about to go through something similar to me had a better experience. If it were made a little easier, a little less scary, if they had a little more understanding, if they weren't written off and talked to like they were some sort of idiot. I've had people talk to me like this once they've found out. I've had people distance themselves from me. I even had one person laugh and say, so you're a robot now because of my shunts. I get it. It's scary. It's awkward. It's not something that people are used to being around. It's not exactly an everyday occurrence, and I hope it stays that way. But shedding some light on the matter, a little education and some support can go a long way in improving someone's life. And isn't that why we're all here today at this conference? To improve either our own lives or others, to be better at what we're doing? We can do it. We can make a difference. We can change and improve people's lives. We just need to change and improve our perspectives. Thanks, guys.
Can I just say that Brain Injury Australia, I am honoured that Kate has added this kind of thing, awareness raising, to her bucket list. We have time for questions. If there are any questions for Kate, please raise your hand. We have some roving microphones here as well. If you feel comfortable in so doing when you ask your question, if you can say who you are and where you're from. Are there any questions for Kate at all? You've stunned them into silence.
That's it. Good job.
Yes.
Hello, Kate. Oh, sorry, after you.
Get a microphone. Whoever's got the microphone first will go.
Morning, everybody. My name's Christian Larson. I'm from Mildura, and I've had a traumatic brain injury. I just want to say that, Kate, I think you're amazing, and yeah, so many things that you spoke about I can relate to. Yeah, I just want to say well done.
Thank you, Kate. Nick Stewart, also with a brain injury. I was wondering, to what extent do you feel that other people have been attempting to impose their beliefs on the way you should react, and how have you found to cope with that?
In regards to my decision for no more surgery, I think it's people who are generally, I have a relationship with, who naturally I'm fabulous, they don't want to lose me, but they've had many different kinds of reactions, and I'm assuming it's in the way that hopefully they want me to change my mind so that I am still with them, and so I understand that from their perspective, but I would hope that people would be understanding from my side of things as well, and how incredibly difficult it is to keep on going through it. So, yeah, does that answer your question in any way? I don't know if it does.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Maria, and I have a son who's had a brain injury.
Right.
And marvellous, and it's answered quite a few questions. I was just wondering, with your short-term memory problems, and you obviously have gone to neuropsychiatrists, do you remember what you discussed? Because I've tried to make him go to neuropsychiatrists, and he has been attending, but lately he's been saying, and been trying to create independence, that he goes to those sessions on his own. The beginning I went, and then now he's on his own. So I don't really understand whether he remembers what he's discussing and whether that's helping him, because he says, I don't know why I'm going to her. So do you remember what you discussed with the neuropsychiatrist?
My phone is my lifeline now.
Yes, so is Charles.
Same with Charles, yeah. So I actually just take my phone out in my neuropsychology sessions now, and I have a specific folder for that, and I take notes, but it's maybe important for Charles to tell the neuropsychologist that he's not remembering, so that they take the time while they're discussing things to allow him to then record it, because that's been absolutely amazing for me to be able to then look back and go, that's right, there was that. And then, I even write down my homework from the session and things like that. As otherwise there wouldn't be a memory of that at all.
So did you create those, I suppose, assistances that by yourself, or were you taught those? Because I've tried to teach Charles organisation and what you've just said, and yes, writing things down. We've got, when he goes to his GP, the GP writes things down and we put it in a binder. The neuropsychiatrist is aware of his short-term memory, but have you been able to create those procedures that will help you remember by yourself, or have you been taught them over and over and over again?
I think it's probably a bit of both. Occupational therapy at the PA hospital helped me sort of set up things, because until then I didn't really know that I even had short-term memory loss, so I didn't know that I should, that I wasn't remembering things. So they helped me set up things, and it was in a notebook which didn't end up working for me because then I'd have to carry around a notebook everywhere, and that's just not going to happen. So my phone, I always have my phone with me, so yeah, in my notes in a specific folder, and now I can't even tell you how many folders I have, but it's easier to find it that way. And that way I can just refer back to it and I know where to find it to get that information as well. No worries.
Can you please thank Kate? I should say that Kate will be here through morning tea, so please, by all means, feel free to talk to her. We have these gifts. I'm also grateful to, many of you might know Chris Durham, a brain injury survivor who's written a series of books. She has donated to the conference 50 copies of Unlocking My Brain to go into the speaker gift pack. So this is for Kate.